LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't predict the future, but it can help you feel confident about future hires. Because Hiring Pro combines real-time insights and candidate data from the LinkedIn network with the criteria you've set for your role to deliver you a list of top-fit candidates. Businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come step into centuries of history that await in Scotland. Castles steeped in legend, walk along cobblestone streets. Come share the warmth of stories passed down through generations. This is a place with a past that is fully present today and all yours to explore. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/Visit Scotland.
Warning: this show contains material that some listeners may find troubling, including discussions of intense horror movie themes, explicit language, movie spoilers, and women speaking. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, horror fans. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Eleanor.
And welcome to Horror Sandbox, the podcast where we dig around in horror films and see what we can unearth.
That's right. Before we get started with today's movie, Charlie, I think we're going to cope a little bit differently today, aren't we?
We are. So today we have an announcement and a request. But first we'll do the announcement. So we've been seeing a lot of questions and comments on social media, which has been amazing. So we thought it might be good to open up our email for questions and answers and then host like a bonus episode with a short little question and answers thing in the next few weeks. It'll be a separate episode rather than something we do at the top of the show, and it won't take place of our movie review for that week. So you guys will just get an extra little bonus episode in addition to your horror movie fix. What we need you guys to do is to send us your questions to our email. Our email is pod@horrorsandbox.com. That's pod@horrorsandbox.com. And we need those questions in before May 28th. That's a Thursday. And we'll get through as many as we can. If you don't want to email, we'll probably do a post on TikTok and Insta requesting questions as well, and you could reply there.
Yes, so we do hope you throw us some questions, and hopefully we can get through as many as possible. If there's a lot of response, maybe we'll do this again in a few months. So now for our request, if you would indulge us for a moment. We have to admit, there are way more of you at this point, 10 episodes in, than we anticipated. And a special shout out to all the women here, because we've heard from a lot of you saying that you're thrilled to see women doing this. And watching you guys talk to each other in the comments on social media and cheering us on and sending us messages, it is absolutely warming our chilly little horror hearts. So, for all of you who are here now, whether you're a scream queen or a horror dude or a non-binary dreadhead, thank you so much. We're thrilled, and you are the bestest and most persistent horrors in the best possible way.
You absolutely are. And so we have an ask. We'd love if there were more of you to share in this passion of ours. So we would be thrilled if you took a few seconds to leave a 5-star rating and review on all of our usual platforms. So you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Give us a follow on TikTok or Insta. And just interact with our social media. We love hearing from you guys. It's been so fun. It really does make a difference, those ratings, as far as helping listeners like you find us and helping like-minded horror lovers find each other. I've taken the time to read each and every comment you all have left on our social media and all the DMs you've sent us and emails we've gotten. And I do my best to respond to as many as I can. And I am just floored by the love and support we've been receiving. I've been in shock for the last few weeks with the amazing reception we've gotten. And when I'm up like late feeding my newborn or just exhausted on the couch at the end of the day, I just sit there and enjoy going through and reading all the feedback you guys sent us, all the stories you sent in, some of the theories you've added or corrections you sent us. It's all so fun to read. So thank you for all of that. Thank you for engaging. Keep the comments coming. And yeah, thank you. So anyways, with that shameless plea over, Eleanor, what are we digging into today?
Well, speaking of things that make us smile, we watched the 2022 film Smile. The IMDb summary is: after witnessing a bizarre traumatic incident involving a patient, a psychiatrist becomes increasingly convinced that she is being threatened by an uncanny entity. The writer-director is Parker Fenn. The stars are Sosie Bacon, Jesse T. Usher, and Kyle Gallner. And we can't dig around in a horror sandbox without our trusty rusty tools. So, Charlie, what is your Bloody Shovel Award?
So I was really torn between two on this one, but I think I've picked it. So I was torn between worst birthday party and worst horror movie fiance. But I'm going to go with worst birthday party because I bet there's more bad horror movie fiancés out there.
I was going to say, I bet there are listeners screaming some names of some terrible fiancés right now. Their own or movie ones.
Yes, and I'm sure we'll stumble across them at some point. So yes, my bloody shovel is worst birthday party. What is yours?
I had to go with best marketing. The marketing for this was incredible, and I'm hoping we're going to talk about it more because it was so fun.
We are. Yeah, I definitely have a little section in the end. It's pretty crazy what they did. It was really neat.
Let's dig in. So the opening scene is a close-up of a dead woman on a mattress. So right away, it's just like hitting you in the face. The camera is kind of turning and panning out. She looks like she's been either throwing up or drooling. And then we just see the room is covered in pills and empty pill bottles, empty alcohol bottles, cigarettes. There's clothes and trash everywhere. It's really over the top. And then we see some family photos, and there's this really haunting wailing sound. And as the camera pans around, you see a kid staring in horror at this scene, and she looks like she's maybe 8 or 10.
Yeah, and you know what this scene reminds me of? It reminded me a lot of the opening of Midsummer. And that made me realize that as I was watching this whole movie, almost the entire time, I was like, oh, this is just like this movie or that movie. And so that's not to say that Smile isn't unique. It's definitely unique, but there's also some very clear lines of influence. Like, obviously, it's very similar to It Follows or The Ring when it comes to curses and some other things. But yeah, I think the listeners will hear us as we go through this will be like, oh yeah, and this scene reminded me of this horror movie. So yeah, just something that I caught that I thought was interesting.
That is interesting. And what you made me think of just now is kind of like what is scary to a certain generation. Because the movies you just mentioned are all fairly new. So I bet you go back a few decades and there are similar kind of themes that you see throughout other horror movies because those scares were what frightened that generation of horror movie audiences. So there's probably like a brilliant, I don't know, sociologist out there who has written about this, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, because I think it's just taking used horror movie tropes and just giving them like a fresh little frightening spin. So, and it does probably depend on the generation which of those ones you pick up and relate to different movies.
And based on the camera work in this particular movie, it's quite literally spin, the way the camera keeps spinning around.
Yes, it is.
So as that scene kind of ends abruptly, we cut to a woman waking up in an office. She's been dozing at her desk and her phone is ringing. We assume that what was happening in the first scene was either a dream or a memory. She answers as Dr. Cotter, and this is Dr. Rose Cotter, a psychiatrist, and she works in a psychiatric emergency ward. It cuts to a close-up of a man in distress in a waiting room, and he keeps repeating, she's going to die, mom's going to die, they're all going to die. It doesn't matter, nothing matters, she doesn't matter, and just kind of like clearly kind of manic. The orderly who has led Dr. Cotter into the room says that they can't get him to say anything else. So Dr. Cotter's like, okay, I got it, and the orderly leaves. She sits down next to the man who is known to her. His name is Carl, and she asks what's going on. And he asks if he is dying. And she says she doesn't think so, but she thinks he's just having another episode. He gets really mad and says he can feel everything squeezing him, and then he's really scared. And then she reminds him that although it feels real, it can't actually hurt him.
Yeah, so this scene does a lot with just these lines to set us up for the whole movie. First off, I think most of what Carl says in this scene, if not all of it, comes true or has come true in the past. Like, mom's gonna die, Rose's mom died, she's gonna die, Laura dies, etc. So I think right there it's just giving you the whole plot of the movie. And then the other thing is that line where she says, it feels real, but it can't hurt you. That gets used against her so much this entire movie, almost every scene. Just the idea of people dismissing her feelings and experiences because, quote unquote, they can't hurt her because they're not real to the outside world, but they're very real to her. So I think it's an important line.
Oh, yeah. It brings you right in, too. It does a really good job of capturing your attention and ramping up the tension right away. So she leaves the room and she enters the hall of the hospital. We see the orderly take Carl down the hall as Dr. Cotter talks to the nurses to let them know that he needs to be under observation for a few days. He's basically harmless but should be checked on every few hours. They tell her that Dr. Desai is looking for her. Then we see an overhead shot of an ambulance arriving with a screaming patient who is strapped to a gurney. And I think they're using a drone. It kind of pans up from the overhead shot and closes in on a window. And it enters the window as ominous music rises, and then we focus on a door.
Yeah, so you mentioned this earlier, but if you notice throughout the movie, there's like a lot of these upside down shots or these like twisting shots, like when the sister twists her head upside down for that one jump scare. I think all that like twisting and upside down is symbolic of the way that smiles are used throughout this movie. So, and we'll talk about that more at the end, but basically how it's turning the way a smile is traditionally used on its head.
Yeah, turning it upside down. It's creepy. Like, even though it's literally just kind of an upside down shot, the way that they film it, the pace of it and the music, it's very creepy.
I think it plays into the little bit too of like the warped reality that the characters are experiencing too. But
that's the vibe I was getting too. I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the door that we're focusing on is Dr. Desai's office. Dr. Cotter knocks and enters, and then he asks her why she sent a patient to another facility when that patient doesn't have insurance. They have a mild argument about this because the board isn't happy, but she says they need to remember why they're even doing this for the patients. And he says, listen, just give me a heads up. I'm not mad, but you're putting me in a rough spot. And then he kind of apparently notices that the clothing she's wearing was what she'd been wearing the previous day, and he asks her if she's been there all night. So we're kind of establishing that she's putting a lot of hours in, perhaps too many. In the next scene, Dr. Cotter is packing up to head home when the phone rings, and we think that she's going to miss the call, but she rushes back to answer it.
Yes, and can we just say that work is what kills her in the end? That's what my first thought I thought was, it was work. It was a problem all along.
This movie really is about work-life balance, isn't it?
It is.
So we cut to a nurse walking with Rose through a hospital hall, giving her the rundown of a 26-year-old grad student who was brought in by EMS due to a public disturbance. She doesn't have a psych history, but was involved in another report in which her professor bludgeoned himself to death with a hammer, and she was the only witness. They go into the room, and the patient, Laura, is hiding in a corner. We don't actually see her until Dr. Cotter shuts the door, and then we see her behind there. And she looks awful. Rose assures her that the hospital is safe, and Laura says, well, not for me. And then Rose asks her to sit, and she pulls out a recording device. And I've got to say, the framing and the colors of this, I don't know if you would call it an intake room or something like that, but it's really striking, and there has to be some symbolism happening here, right?
I think there's definitely something happening here. And what I got out of it was that I think this room's intentionally made to look sterile and a little bit fake. And in a more literal sense, it's because this is a sterile environment in a mental health crisis facility. So it's designed to be a safe place for people who are potentially harmful against themselves or someone else. And therefore, the room, it's very basic. It's very open. It's artificial, and it has a lot of safety strategies in place so that that kind of thing doesn't happen in this room. And yet it happens anyway. And not only does it happen, but it happens by a monster that only the person it is happening to can see. I think this scene makes it incredibly obvious that there's not a single place in that room for the monster to hide. And so right off the bat, we're questioning, is it a monster? Is it in their mind? Well, if it's in their mind, it's still hurting them. So it's just kind of that little warped reality here starts, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is well done. It definitely makes you question the reality that's happening in the movie versus what you're seeing on the screen. As far as what the character is experiencing, it's really good. So Rose asks some very basic questions like the day and the month, and Laura, after a few of these questions, she says, I'm a PhD candidate. I'm not some lunatic, which, first of all, I don't know that those are mutually exclusive.
I can't not take this moment to say that one of the most mentally unstable people I've ever known was a PhD candidate. So I think they can be lunatics.
I can't say that because I guess they are not candidates anymore. They're both PhDs. Congrats to my brother, by the way, who successfully defended his dissertation recently. So he's now a doctor.
Ooh, congratulations.
Yeah, both he and his wife are PhDs, and they're wonderful people. But I just don't think having a lot of education means you can't also be crazy.
Did you just call your brother mentally unstable?
No. I'm just saying the opportunity exists for him should he ever decide to take it, and his PhD won't save him or prevent him from his goals.
That's fair.
So yeah, don't let education prevent you from achieving your wildest dreams. So Laura says she's been seeing something that no one else can see, and that it looks like people, but it isn't. It can kind of manifest as someone she knows, like family or even dead relatives. She specifically mentions her grandfather who died in front of her when she was 7 years old. She says it wears people's faces like masks, and she says that she can't see it right now, but when she does, it's smiling, but in an evil way, and she gets the feeling that something awful is going to happen. Rose asks about a history of hallucinations, and Laura says it tells her things. Then she gets super emotional and she says, I'm going to fucking die and no one will listen to me. And then she turns away. Rose asks her to look back at her. And when she does, Laura absolutely loses it. And she flies backwards, screaming and knocking over furniture, and she shatters this glass vase of flowers. She keeps screaming, but then she seems to start choking, and Rose jumps up to call for help, and then, because there's like an emergency phone in the room, and then the room goes completely silent. And Rose looks around and she sees Laura standing behind her, absolutely statue still, with the worst smile that you have ever seen. Rose realizes that she is holding a piece of the shattered vase, and then Laura starts cutting her face, and she takes the piece of glass and she puts it to her temple and then slices all the way down to the other side of her throat underneath, and then collapses without ever losing that smile or breaking eye contact with Rose. And as she's on the floor bleeding out and staring at Laura and smiling, help rushes in and the camera pans slowly back to Laura's stunned face, and then it zooms in on her eyes.
So before we say goodbye to Laura forever, I have a little fun fact. Did you know that the actress who plays Laura in Smile is originally from Parker Finn, the director's short film?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I'm going to go over that short film at the end because it plays a role here.
Okay, good. So we don't have to say goodbye to Laura forever.
Not forever.
Okay, and then as it's zooming in on our eyes, we get like this really jarring title card for the movie. And then we see her in a conference room with a glass of water. She's sitting there kind of stunned as some men talk with Dr. Desai outside. We see the men start interviewing her about the incident, and these are detectives. One of them calls Laura a head case, and Rose does not appreciate this. Rose also said it could have been acute post-trauma psychosis, and she describes the delusions that Laura told her about. She tells them about the wicked kind of crazy smiling, and then one of the detectives calls her fucking crazy, and then the scene kind of cuts to what we assume is Laura's body under a sheet in the morgue or something, and the blood from her wound has seeped through the sheet, and it looks like a bright red evil smile in the sheets.
And can I just say, I know that one of the themes of this movie is people not believing or listening to other people's mental health crisis, but it is wild the way that cops talk about this recently dead woman. Like, it's insane.
To the person who not only watched her die, but was trying to help her, no less.
Right. Like, clearly everyone's traumatized here, and these guys show no tact at all. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's gross. So then we cut to some more of this unsettling overhead footage that's kind of inverting and disorienting, and it's following Rose's car home. She comes home and she's greeted by a sweetest little cat. His name is Mustache. And I have to admit, I had seen this movie when it first came out, but I don't think I watched it more than once. So when I watched it again for this show, I can't remember what happens to the cat. And now I'm so stressed because I think it's going to be something bad and I can't remember.
I can't believe that you couldn't remember that scene, because as cat lovers, like, that one stuck in my head for a while.
I feel like I can understand why I didn't remember it because I didn't want to.
Yes, you were like, it never happened. It was fake.
Yeah. So Rose changes her clothes and we see some kind of blood splattered on her shirt. She's obviously upset. She showers and then she gets some wine. And then she's in her semi-dark kitchen and she's just staring. And the camera swings slowly around and we see Laura smiling that smile.
Yes, and it looks so much like the mom in the corner, like the ghost mom in the corner of the movie Hereditary in one of the opening shots there too. It's very similar vibes.
That is exactly what it reminded me of.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really well done too. I just like that it's creepy and simple. That's what I like about it.
Yeah. So as she is staring, somebody says her name and she gets startled and drops her glass, but it's just her fiance, Trevor. She tells him about losing the patient and that basically that's why she's so on edge. He hugs her and offers to let them bail out on the dinner plans they had for tonight, but Rose says they need to go. So then later at dinner, her sister, Holly, is going over the absolute batshit insane schedule that she's keeping for her kid. She's like listing off everything: karate, swim, soccer, theater, Spanish. Like it's too much. I'm sorry. This is unhinged behavior. Put kids in activities, but you don't have to do all of them, and certainly not at one time.
So I think that this is actually very intentionally done. I think this scene shows how ineffectively the sisters are actually coping with their trauma by overworking themselves. But there's more to come on that at the end.
Oh my gosh, you might be right. Because Rose is doing it through work. Holly's doing it through what she's investing in her kid. But it's at the end of the day, it's the same thing. They're just running themselves ragged. Ooh,
And
okay.
it's both related to their mom because it's what they didn't get from her.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll cut all this out if we talk about it a lot at the end, but that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so she mentions that her kid's 7th birthday is coming up, and then Holly kind of gets irritated because Rose says she might have to miss it because of work. Holly brings up that they should sell the house that they grew up in, and Rose absolutely bites her head off about it. And then Rose and Trevor go back home, and then they arm their house, and they feed the cat. So the next day, Rose is in the office break room, and she is watching some coffee brew. Did you notice her mug?
Okay, so no, I didn't. And I was peeking at your notes while I was watching this movie, and I saw all the times you call out smiles, and I was like, I thought I was the one that was good with attention to detail, but man, you caught all the smiles, and I didn't realize how many there were in this movie. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot, and it does a good job of making you feel creeped out by like what is supposed to be one of the most innocuous and friendly things, which is like the little, stereotypical smiley face, like emoji or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the whole point of the movie, right? Taking this thing that, well, not the whole point, one of the points, taking this thing that's supposed to embody like happiness and kindness and making it literally evil. Like it's pretty cool that they were able to do that.
Yeah. As she's watching her smiley cup brew, she seems really out of it. She checks in with the nurse station and she asks for a copy of the police report from the suicide of Laura's professor. And then one of the detectives from the day earlier, Joel, stops by saying he was just there to check on her. And then you kind of realize that they're actually they had been in a relationship before, which should have been a conflict of interest for the interview, right?
Yeah, I think it definitely should have. In his defense, he does later say that he had no idea that she was the one involved in the incident, so he just was responding to a call. But yeah, you would think that they would have taken him off the case after that.
Yeah. So she says, thanks, but you didn't need to do that, and walks away. And then he's just kind of standing there, and the nurse is glaring at him. I love nurses. Their humor is unmatched. One of my sisters is a nurse, and her stories are amazing. But this particular nurse, she's like, hey, she's engaged now, but I'm single. And then we see Rose reading the report in her office, and it mentions that the professor was smiling the entire time he was ending his own life. Holly calls, and they kind of make up on the phone, have a nice sister chat, while Rose is looking out the window. Holly says, hey, if you're not going to be able to come to the party, you should at least get a gift. And just so you know, he's really into electric model trains right now. As they're talking, Rose is looking through a window, and down in the courtyard, she can see someone staring up at her, perhaps smiling.
Yes. So when I was researching this movie, came across an interesting note where the director actually confirmed that the smile, curse, or monstrosity takes the form of Rose's mother in the hospital courtyard before she sees her at the end of the movie. So at the end of the movie isn't the first time we see Rose's mom. And I think this is the scene that he's talking about, but I can't be 100% certain because she's far away. But he does confirm that she sees her in a hospital courtyard one time before the end of the movie.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because you can't really make much out about the figure, but it's definitely staring right at her and it could be smiling. So in the next scene, Rose is walking the halls. She's walking by patient rooms and passing through like a few normal hospital activity things. And then she passes Carl's room and we're kind of watching her walk by the halls. So as she passes, you can see little glimpses into each room. And then when she passes Carl's room, you see him sitting bolt upright in bed, facing the door, with that smile. And that technically isn't a jump scare, right? But it definitely feels like one. It's very scary.
Yeah, I think the reason it feels so unsettling is because you're not anticipating a jump scare at that point, but you are looking in the background and it just like, so when you see it come by and it's just so unnatural and you're like, oh no, okay, maybe the smile thing is real and it's super creepy. I like it.
Yeah, it's well done. So she stops and then comes back and he's still smiling like that. She tries to talk to him and he isn't answering and he kind of looks catatonic. And by the way, when you were watching this, did you wonder how much the actors' faces all must have hurt because of the smiling? Because like I think about how much my face hurts after we do an episode where we're telling entirely too many jokes that we have to edit out. And it hurts so much. Like I can't imagine doing this for the hours that it takes to film this movie.
They definitely had to have like practiced with their faces to smile that particular way. It's crazy. I wonder if they cast people specifically for their ability to smile. They must have. Also, one thing to note is that all the smiles in this movie are organic. So there's no special or visual effects enhancing those smiles at all.
Oh, that's good. So Rose, as she's looking at catatonic Carl, she snaps in front of his face, and then he starts saying that same kind of mantra that he was repeating to himself. She's going to die. I'm going to die. All that. And then she tells him to look at her. And so he does, but then he screams, "You're going to die. You're going to die." And then he gets up and starts like approaching her. And then she yells for help. And we see the orderlies run into the room. But now he's on the bed and he's not menacing over her like he had been, but they tackle him anyway as he screams. And then we cut to Rose and Dr. Desai discussing her apparent overreaction. He says he thinks she's been way too traumatized by the death of Laura and tells her to take a paid week off because she's been working 80 hours a week and not sleeping. So basically, he's like, come back here focused so you can do your job.
Can I just say, like, being forced to take paid leave is my dream. I would, like, the people who are upset that they're being forced to take leave is wild to me. If someone was like, hey, go take a week off, you've been working too hard, I'd be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, goodbye.
Oh yeah, 100%. So in the next scene, we see her leaving the hospital. There's kind of some ominous music playing and she gets into her car. She sits there and she's clearly trying to do like a breathing technique for anxiety or something similar. And she's trying to calm herself down. We zoom in on her face and then she cuts to very disorienting sky shots. And this one is of the city skyline. She stops at a toy store to get the train for her nephew, whose name is Jackson. And then the camera lingers on an old vintage sign for a toy train set with a smiling family. Later, she's home and she is wrapping the gift.
Okay, listeners, I'm going to need your help with this one. And I think I might just be crazy. Maybe the smile curse is upon me. But in this scene, I swear, I saw something move in the corner. And it's funny, my significant other was like, it's probably a shadow from a boom mic, which maybe. But right after she looks up from texting her fiance, if you look in the right-hand corner of the screen, I think that something is there moving. But my significant other said he can't see it, and Eleanor said she can't see it. So I need your help. If anyone else sees it, let me know.
Yeah, I tried. I watched this like after I saw your notes, I went back and looked and I rewatched the scene like 4 times. I can't see it, but I also have to tell you, I was watching it on the TV in my bedroom and that one kind of sucks. So there might be something there and I just simply can't see it.
Yes, go watch it on a big screen TV. But yeah, I will say I tried to like pause it and then do the like slow, creep through it while it's paused and I couldn't see it. So I'm probably just crazy, but whatever.
You see, this movie has a very good effect on you, on all of us.
It does.
As she is wrapping the gift, she gets a text from Trevor, who is stuck working late. She pours herself some wine, and all of a sudden the home alarm goes off. She drops her wine again, grabs the scissors from the table, and then checks the door before she disarms the system. There's a weird noise like wind whistling, and it looks like her side door was open. The phone rings, and it's the alarm company checking on the alert. They ask all the standard questions, and then they ask, "Are you alone in the house?" And she says, "Yes." And then the voice gets a little bit deeper as we're watching from behind her head and almost like we're someone staring at her from the darkness. And then the voice says, "Are you sure you're alone? Are you sure you didn't let something inside, Rose?" Which, so creepy. And then it tells her to look behind her, and she jumps as the phone rings again, and it was never in her hand. And this time, it's the security company for real. And I've got to say, this movie does an incredible job of making you doubt what you're seeing. Like, who can you trust?
Yes, I really like it. And I think the idea of trust and trauma that they do throughout this movie, it's so real. And maybe it's another metaphor for the smile. Like you finally, like the trust being something you can't rely on. You can't even trust yourself or someone else with your mental health issues or your trauma. And when you try to, they just smile at you and pretend to understand, but they don't.
So we cut to watching the cops searching the property because they've come out to respond to the alarm. Rose is standing outside, and the cops are telling her there's nothing to be worried about, and probably her back door just didn't latch properly, which set off the alarm.
Just another example of someone not believing and not helping.
And then Trevor comes home right as the cops are leaving. Rose tells Trevor that she doesn't even remember setting the alarm. And she's, as they're talking about this, she's calling for the cat, Mustache. And Trevor is very worried about her because she's very distracted and anxious, and they still can't find their cat. And then we cut to an obvious dream sequence of her mother, who is laying perfectly still and then gasps in kind of a creepy way as Rose wakes up. She apparently can't sleep. And we see her with her laptop and headphones listening to her recording from Laura's intake. She notices that she can hear a whispering that she didn't notice before, so she tries to isolate it, and she thinks it's saying her name, Rose. And then as she's focusing on the screen, suddenly this corpse-looking figure barks in her ear. And do you think this was Laura, or do you think it was her mom?
So at first I thought it was Laura, because Laura's been the one that's been haunting her. But I guess later we do find out that as her mom was dying, she was calling Rose for help. So she kept saying like, "Rose, Rose." So probably it's like a little PTSD flashback of her mom, right? What do you think?
I was torn. I think because I think she does say Rose, so I think it's more likely it was her mom, but it could be either one.
Or a combination of the two. One's voice, one's face. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. That could be it.
Yeah.
And then what did you think of this jump scare? Because even the first time I saw it, I was like, I know it's coming. I know there's a jump scare coming. Because she's sitting there with her headphones and she's getting more and more focused. So you're like, something is about to happen. And it still got me. Did it get you?
Yeah. So this one got me. And I think the first time watching it, I probably looked away. I know I definitely jumped. This movie is really good with jump scares. I was on edge the whole time. And even the second time I watched it, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to look away till this scene's over. I know what happens. I don't need to see it again. So it got me.
It got me even on the second time. It's really well done. I like it. So she screams and freaks out and gets a knife. And then all of this commotion brings in Trevor, who is terrified and trying to help her. And then we cut to the next scene where Rose has surprised her therapist, Dr. Northcott, at her office, and she's asking for an urgent session. She's clearly unraveling, but she's still trying to do the right thing, what she thinks is the correct thing for someone who's experiencing these, what she assumes are psychological conditions or symptoms. She's trying to talk through her feelings and process everything. Dr. Northcott asks if she's still blaming herself for her mother's suicide, and she says she's not trying to reprocess that. She asks for a prescription that's usually given for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, among other things, and she describes all of her symptoms and experiences in a very clinical manner. And her doctor says she is not in psychosis, but still has anxiety and trauma that are not yet healed, and that's the source of her problem. The doctor tells her to change her routine to take her mind off of it and to avoid any triggers that might be making this worse, and that they should probably resume their sessions. And then once they do that for a little bit, they'll talk about perhaps medicating.
Yeah, and can I just say, like, this scene's interesting. I feel like that therapist just isn't that good of a therapist. If I just feel like it's so obvious how unraveled she's becoming that yes, they should continue doing sessions, but maybe there needs to be additional intervention at play at this point. Like she knows Rose, like she's not coming there just to get medication. She's a doctor. She could probably get it herself if she really wanted to. Like she's trying to do things the right way, and this doctor's just like, come back next week. We'll see how you're doing. I just don't love that.
Yeah, and she looks awful. She looks like she hasn't been sleeping. She looks like she's under a lot of stress, and she witnessed something terrible. So even if I feel like you don't need more information than that. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I felt the same way.
Yeah, I think it just ties back into the minimization of mental health issues that happens throughout this whole movie, even when it comes to the professionals.
Yeah. So in the next scene, Rose is putting on makeup and trying to smile, and she looks awful. She's not doing well, but she's trying to put on a happy face. And she goes to her nephew's birthday party. Holly abandons Rose to her friends while she does mom of the party stuff. One friend, Stephanie, is so excited to meet a psychiatrist that she just immediately starts picking her brain about, her job. And later, as everyone is singing happy birthday, it looks like Rose is there, but not really there. And as she watches her nephew, Jackson, opening gifts, he comes to the one that she got for him. And this is where I suddenly remembered what happened to the cat. He opens the box and it's not the toy train. It's Mustache, and he's quite dead. And I'm sorry, that prop looked terrible and fake and corny. And just like in Mother of Flies with the miscarried stillborn or whatever, I'm glad because I can't handle this crap.
Yeah, I was also very glad that the cat looked like kind of fake and wiggly. And it's funny because for a movie that doesn't use any like special or visual effects, the cat looked very fake. But this is my bloody shovel worst birthday ever. And the other thing in this scene, I was like, how did the cat get in the present? Did you think that to yourself?
Yeah, did she put it in there? Was it the
Yeah.
monster? Did Trevor do it?
Yeah, and I was trying to think back. I was like, well, wait, because she was wrapping up the present, so it was already wrapped. So did she do it before, like, she had that breakdown at home with the phone call and everything? But then I went back and looked, and I realized, like, right before, or the alarm goes off right before she puts the tape on the wrapping paper. So the wrapping paper falls back open. So all of that whole scene with the alarm happens, and then we assume she goes back and wraps it after. So whatever entity was in the house could have done it. Or it could have been her. But I thought it was interesting because the first time I watched it, I didn't catch that. So,
and it's more of that second guessing, like what's real, what's supernatural. Is this all her, mind betraying her? Is she losing her mind? Yeah, all of that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So Rose freaks out and she grabs the cat while she's sobbing and she's begging people to believe that it wasn't her. And then suddenly that friend Stephanie from earlier is in all the chaos and the people like screaming and disturbed. This friend is just sitting there with the smile. And then Rose looks at Holly and starts screaming, "You see her, right?" But Stephanie isn't in that chair anymore. And then suddenly she is right behind her, smiling. And Rose falls back and crashes into a glass coffee table and it just shatters. Glass is everywhere in her skin and she's screaming and the birthday is ruined. We cut to the ER where she's being treated. Dr. Desai comes to check on her. He's clearly worried. And we can see her husband and sister are fighting in another room and she just stares at the pain chart, which is covered in smiley faces.
Such good little, I love the way they do that in the whole movie. They're everywhere.
They really are. Later, Trevor and Rose are pulling back up to their home, and Rose starts telling Trevor what's going on. She says it's going to be a hard thing to listen to, but she needs him to hear it. She describes it as best she can, and he does not look convinced. He actually looks repulsed. She says, "I need you to say something." And he's like, "What?" And then he says she's asking him to believe that she's being attacked by ghosts. And he says he just really can't deal with that. And that she must have gotten her craziness from her crazy mom. And kind of like we've been talking about this whole time, that absolute, like the sorrow of not being listened to when you need it the most. Like even if what you're saying sounds unhinged or unbelievable or part of a mental health crisis, just not being listened to is awful.
Absolutely terrible. I hate Trevor so much. And it's like, not only does he not listen to her or not believe her, then he like turns it against her in the worst way possible and is like, well, you must be crazy just like your mom.
We cut to Rose in the mirror of her bathroom, and she's just looking horrible. And then she checks on Trevor, who is sleeping on the couch. She takes her laptop to bed with her, where she reads that police statement again. And then this time, she actually looks up the professor who killed himself. And as she's doing this, something starts talking to her from the bathroom, and it's kind of whispering, "Rose, come here." And she responds by turning off the light and covering up, which, nope, I could never.
Okay, wait. So you're about to learn something about me that I don't think I've ever told you before. So my family, and again, let me preface with saying, I don't know. I don't claim to know what spirits are, what ghosts are, if they're real, if they're not, whatever. But my family is kind of known for seeing things when we were kids. Like, we all have a ghost story where we saw things. And my first house was 1,000% haunted, like super haunted. And there was something in my closet, and I had the bedroom right across from the attic door. And it was like this black, it was literally a black door that led up to an unfinished attic with like all these nooks and crannies and hiding. It's so creepy. And I would hear things all the time when I was a kid. And my way of coping with it was, well, if I can't see it, it won't bother me. So I would lay there and put my head under the covers and close my eyes really tight and try my best to fall asleep very often.
Well, clearly it worked because you are still here.
I'm still here. I will say there was one time my bed shook. That was the one time I was like, okay, maybe it can do something. But my bed shook, and then I was like, whatever. And I went back to bed. Yeah, so it does happen. I relate with Rose here.
That's wild. So yeah, this voice that's calling to her is her mother's voice, and she can hear her begging for help. And we hear her saying, "Mommy made a mistake." And this is the source of her guilt, that she didn't help her mom when she was overdosing or dying from whatever it was. She turns away from the voice, and then we can actually see a figure in the bathroom door, and then it screams her name. And then we cut to the next scene. She is trying to visit the professor's widow, and she does this by posing as a reporter. And the widow is describing her husband's unraveling. And then when she mentions seeing his face, they do this flash cut to his body at the morgue. It's super gruesome. His teeth, which are all out of alignment because his face has been split open, they seem to be arranged in a really twisted, crooked smile. And then the widow shows Rose images that he was drawing before he died. And this room is just covered in images of really creepy smiles and old artwork that was featuring very creepy smiles. There's one of them I recognize. It looks like a jester or something. I'm not sure where it's from, but I know I've seen it before.
Yeah, so that one, it's really common all over social media, actually, because of how creepy it is. It's called The Laughing Fool. No one knows for sure who the artist is, but it's attributed to a Dutch Renaissance painter. And I think the cool thing, I know a little bit about the history of this painting, or like the symbolism behind it. I don't think it has much to do with the movie, but what you've probably seen is on social media, everyone calls this one out for the figure. He's holding a pair of eyeglasses without lenses, and it's basically like a symbolic way of saying like the people he's looking at are false scholars. So like they think they're smart and they have wisdom, but they're actually really dumb. And it's just like him looking through his fingers, laughing at the people that are supposed to be laughing at him. But it is a creepy painting. It's incredibly unsettling, and it's all over social media.
Yeah, and he's wearing like this button-up, fur-lined, multicolored jacket thing with a hood, but the hood has like dinosaur spikes on it and fuzzy ears. And for something from the 16th century, it kind of looks weirdly modern. Like, I feel like you could buy this at Hot Topic today.
You're absolutely right. I could see this at Hot Topic, but I do think he's supposed to be a donkey. I think because he's a jester, an ass, it's a donkey costume.
Yeah, I could see that.
But it's definitely, regardless of anything, it is a creepy painting.
Yeah, his smile is very gummy, so his teeth look creepy, and his eyebrows aren't really there, so he looks like, I don't know. It's just, go look it up. We'll throw it on our socials, I'm sure. It's disturbing. So the widow says that her husband was talking about a monster trying to get inside of him as he was kind of unraveling. We see a picture of a man, like a photograph of a man who the widow says was the professor's brother, and that brother had died horribly in an accident when they were younger. And Rose asks when it all started, and she says it happened after he got back from a conference where he saw a woman die by her own hand, Rose asks if he knew why it was happening or if he had said he had found answers. And suddenly the widow kind of realizes that Rose is not a reporter and kicks her out. And then this really wild music starts. It sounds like bones rolling around or boiling water or something. It's really creepy. And then are we going to talk about how everybody, or I assume we are going to talk about how everyone who's impacted by this all experienced a violent childhood trauma in addition to witnessing the suicides?
Of course we are. Yes, I have a section at the end for us
Oh,
about
good.
all of that.
Good.
Yes.
This is my reward for not Googling everything while the movie is going.
You're welcome.
So in the next scene, Rose visits her ex, Joel, the cop, and she attempts small talk at first. And credit to him, for a bachelor pad, he has both dish soap and hand soap on the counter. So good for him.
I literally never would have noticed that had you not. You were really scouring the background of this movie, and I love it. But
Oh, see, I learned my lesson from Hereditary.
yes, you did. You're really paying attention now. Yeah, that's so funny. I noticed it too now that you say it. And his place is incredibly clean as well and decorated. So good for him.
Yeah, it's nice. So she stops the small talk and then asks him to look up the person who the professor had seen kill herself at the conference. And that woman's name was Angela Powell, who was a real estate agent. Joel sees a picture from the scene and it looks like she gouged out her eyes. It's really gruesome. She asked Joel to look up the real estate agent, and then he figures out that she was witness to a suicide days before her own death, and that there's a video file from security at a gas station. And we watch the video, and it's a smiling man taking hedge trimmers from the back of a truck, walking up to Angela, and then stabbing himself with them. This causes a giant gush of bright red blood to explode from him before he collapses. Rose says that she has to leave and asks Joel to print some of the evidence files for her. So the next scene, Rose goes back home and she has all these evidence files with her. Trevor is there and he's with Dr. Northcott, the therapist for Rose. He says that he called her because he's really worried about Rose. And Rose sees this as a betrayal of trust, and then they all yell at each other, and then she leaves and she goes to her sister's house. Holly's husband, Greg, answers and tries to keep her away, but Holly goes out onto the porch with Rose. Rose says she's been cursed. And at least Holly tries to listen. Rose shows her the suicide scene photos, and Holly is like, nope, not having any of this. And then Holly says that this is exactly what happened with their mother, and that Rose sounds just like her, and that she's unraveling. Rose accuses her of never being around. Basically, how would you know what our mother was like? You never were there. And says she left her alone with their mother, and that this was part of the problem. They kind of cry and yell at each other, and then Rose kind of regrets it. Holly goes back inside and shuts the door, and then Rose goes back to the car. And then we see Holly come out of her house and walk up to the car and knock, but we only see her from like the neck down. And then suddenly Holly's head twists down and is just like hanging upside down, and it's like a jump scare in the car window. And then Rose starts to break down, screaming and crying, and it pans out and her sister isn't there. It was just a vision. But we pan to the house and we can see her nephew Jackson watching this all from the window.
Yeah, two things here. One, I wish the trailer hadn't ruined that jump scare, because that one would have been so good, but I knew it was coming, so of course I did my normal look away. But the other thing I found about this scene in particular was that they had to reshoot it a couple times or change it. At first, they just had the head fall down, but the director said it looked too, I don't know, like he wanted to add more of that twisting element, so they reshot it to add the twisting of the neck to, I think it's more of that symbolism of the twisted smile. So I thought that was cool.
It was done really well. I think the twisting needed to be there.
Agreed. Yeah, he did a good job with that.
We cut to a new scene and Rose is still crying in her car, but now she's in a diner parking lot, and then she eats a burger. And I feel like, ladies, we've all been there, sobbing in our car, eating a burger.
I am so glad you say that, because I watched this scene and I was like, who hasn't been there where you're like so stressed out for a week that you don't eat at all, and then all of a sudden your like mind snaps and you find yourself in like a Taco Bell parking lot just like stuffing your face. We've all been there.
It's so relatable. She gets a call from Joel, who says he kept looking into what she was talking about with the suicides, and he managed to find 19 linked suicide connected to her case, but that one seems to have gotten away and is still alive. And this was an accountant who watched his coworker kill themselves. He says he broke the pattern by killing a stranger. They decide to take a trip to visit him where he is in prison. And on the way up, Rose fills in Joel and Joel is just kind of trying to process it. Rose says she thinks something is taking over the victims at the last minute, so it's not even a suicide. It's actually like a murder by possession. Joel says that no one survives longer than a week, and it's her 4th day. But Joel promises that this won't happen to her. And bro, I am begging men to stop promising things to women in horror movies because it just never works out. Just stop.
Right? Like, stop making promises.
It's called managing expectations. A message for all the horror movie bros out there. At the prison, they're allowed to see the prisoner. His name is Tally, because Joel says that Rose is actually working in an advisory position with the department and that she is helping them work on a case that is similar to the one that Tally was involved in. And did you notice there's a no talking in the lobby sign, but there's a smiley face drawn in the O of the word lobby?
You know, I didn't. I'm really off my game with this movie. I don't know what I was looking at, but clearly not the right things.
Because
It's incredible, though.
Yeah, it's because he kept hiding from the jump scares.
That's what it is. This one's too tense for me.
They go to see Tally, and Rose asks what he experienced in the days that were leading up to the murder. And she says she has a patient who went through something similar. She asks what it is, and he says that he doesn't know. And then she asks, well, how did you survive? And he tells her to get rid of Joel. So Joel steps out, and Tally says that he found out about a similar chain of deaths that happened in Brazil, where a man killed his neighbor in front of his wife. He says you need to make a huge mess and leave a witness and be as messy and horrible and traumatic as possible. And then in the middle of this discussion, she accidentally lets it slip that she is the one with the curse, not her patient. So he flips out, thinking that she's there trying to put the curse back on him, and then they have to leave. In the next scene, Rose is back at home. Her therapist calls and she ignores it. And then she spreads all these horrible death photos out on her table. She gets a text from Trevor saying that they need to talk, and she is so anxious that she bites her own thumb until it bleeds, and then she goes to rinse it off and stares at the chef's knives that are on the counter. While she's doing this, the doorbell rings and it's her therapist. She hides the photos of the death scenes and she lets her in, and Dr. Northcutt brings up the paranormal experiences. And now Rose is denying that she ever saw anything, and she just clearly wants to get rid of the therapist. She asks how she's feeling, and Rose goes down a list of everyone who is letting her down at the moment. And then her phone rings, and it's her therapist on the phone. So who is in the room with her? And then Dr. Northcutt starts the smile.
And can I ask, do you have a favorite smile in this movie? Like, whose smile creeps you out the most?
Ooh, so this one is very good with Dr. Northcutt, but I think Carl did the best.
That's fair. Carl's is good. This one's my favorite. This smile. And it might just be how insanely creepy this scene is. Because there's a lot of unsettling scenes, but this one gets me. But she has my favorite smile. I think it's really well done.
This actor also, she is gorgeous and she's very polished looking. So when she kind of dips into this unhinged evil smile thing, it's, there's like a little bit of a contradiction there that I think plays very well.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is really well done. She does a very good job.
As she's watching this therapist or this monster in front of her wearing her therapist's skin do the smile, Rose starts sobbing. And the thing in front of her says, "It's almost time, Rose." And it stands up. And Rose says, "What are you?" As Dr. Northcutt grabs her face and pushes her against the wall and just laughs and drools right in her face. And this reminded me of the scene from Alien. Do you know what I'm talking about? That scene where the alien is like right up against Sigourney Weaver's face.
I think so. And you can see like its teeth and there's just spit like dripping off of them. And she's all like, yeah, I know exactly which one you're talking about. And I agree that it looks just like this scene. Like there has to be a straight line between these two scenes to the point where I think I'm going to post this picture on our Instagram so other people can see it because it has to be it.
Yeah, it's gross and terrifying. So we cut to a new scene. We hear more of that awful music and we see Rose smuggling a knife into her hospital. She tells the nurse that she's just getting something from her office, but then she goes into Carl's room to see him sitting up and muttering to himself. He sees her and he's startled and then he freaks out. And so you have to wonder, is he reacting to her from the incident before or is he reacting to her smile? And then Dr. Desai finds her and he's kind of yelling at her, like, what are you doing? And all of a sudden, Rose stabs Carl and she stabs him again and again and again. And Carl starts laughing at her. And then we cut to Dr. Desai's face and he puts his hands up to his face and then he rips his face off. And as this happens, Rose wakes up in her car, still parked in the office parking lot, and she never went in.
Yeah, so this scene is crazy, and I have a funny story about it. So the first time I saw this movie, I was watching it with my brother, his fiance, and my significant other, and he fell asleep on the couch during like Act 1 of this movie, and he woke up to this scene, and he just goes, "Why the hell is Kumar ripping his face off?" And he goes, "I can't with this movie," and fell right back asleep. He is not a horror movie fan, but I just thought it was so funny. Of all the scenes to wake up to, this was the one.
That sounds exactly like him. Oh, yeah, I don't know if we've said it, but the actor who plays Dr. Desai is Cal Penn, who plays Kumar from Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. He's in a ton of other stuff, too.
Yeah, it's the complete opposite of this movie.
He's got range.
He does, legitimately.
She never went in to the hospital. All of that was apparently in her head. And then suddenly Dr. Desai knocks on her window and asks why she's there. He asked her to come inside and said he wants to help her. And she just says, "I need to be alone." And while he's talking to her, he suddenly turns into Carl, laughing with blood pouring from his mouth. Rose freaks out and drives away as Joel calls her, saying that there is a police alert out for her. And then she says she is going to face this alone so that it can't spread. And then we watch another inverted shot of her driving into the countryside. She goes back to her childhood home. You could call it a bit of a fixer-upper.
Just a bit.
It's incredibly rundown, and Joel keeps trying to call her. And somehow this absolute shack of a place the door is locked and she still has the key. She tries to flip on the light switch, which, why? Like, the house is stripped bare and rotting. Why would you even try the electricity?
It's true. And I mean, doesn't she come with a lantern? Like, she knows it doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just force of habit. I don't know. She sees a dark door at the end of the hall, and this is obviously where her mother died. And we hear the eerie music again and the wailing sound. She opens the door, and suddenly she's a child again. And her mother is breathing, but barely. And she calls to her daughter for help. But Rose just stares at her while she asks her to call for help. Back in present time, the room is bare like most of the house, but it's pretty unremarkable. Rose finds an old kerosene lamp, and then she locks up the house, and then she sits in the dark with the lamp. She takes the only chair in the place, and she seems kind of ready to confront her demons. She hears a door open and the hinges squeak. She goes into her mother's old room, and she can hear her sobbing. And her mother is now sitting on the bed and she's crying and she looks up at her. She apologizes to Rose for not being a good mom. And she looks a lot younger than we've seen her in previous, visions or memories, which makes me think this is an older memory of Rose's from before her mother fell into addiction or depression or whatever it is. This scene is actually so heartbreaking. Just the idea of having a family member or someone close to you who was important in your life, maybe should have been a trusted adult or even a parent or just somebody really close to you who you remember them as they were supposed to be, healthy and compassionate and whatever. But everything that happened after that was so terrible as you just kind of watch them slide into either depression or addiction or even a mental illness that they couldn't help. But, you go back in your dreams or you go back in your memory and you think of them before, and to hear them kind of confess to you, like, "I'm sorry, I was awful. I'm sorry this happened." I found this whole scene very gut-wrenching.
Yeah, the whole end of this movie is really sad to me. And what I like about it is that, like, it is sad, but Rose is this character who she is so brave to go back and, like, confront these things head on. It really makes you root for her and like her. Which makes the end of this movie so much harder. So I agree. Definitely heartbreaking.
Yeah, but then we lose all sympathy for her mother because she takes a turn and then starts blaming her daughter and saying, "It's your fault, you didn't call for help." And she's getting angrier. Rose says, "I was 10 years old. This isn't fair. I felt guilty about this my entire life, but it's time to let it go." And then she says, "This is not real." And then her mother says, "But Rose, your mind makes it real." And then her face changes into that smile. And then Rose says, "What are you and why are you doing this to me?" And then the smile says, "Because your mind is so inviting." Which, we're going to unpack this, right, Charlie?
We are. This scene is really good. Right now, I'll just take a moment to say this is probably the biggest moment where the whole like it's not real, it can't hurt you thing that she says at the very beginning comes full circle and is used against her in the worst way. But we will talk about this scene more at the end. Yes.
Okay, good. I can't wait to unpack trauma with you. So the smile gets closer and Rose tries to close the door. And now this thing has grown and it's like 10 feet and it's following Rose down the hall when suddenly she's behind her and it looks like a demon. Which, is it a demon? Should we describe it?
We can describe it. I have a whole section at the end about what this monster might be. Like if it's a demon, if it's an illness, but I'd love to describe it. At first, I mean, it turns into this like long, creepy, crawly form of her mom with this big smiling face and bulging eyes and a very high forehead and like dark black hair. So yeah, it's like super spider-like when it crawls down the hall and just really creepy and unsettling.
And I was thinking of like the transformation of her mother as she remembered her before everything happened, and then this transformation into something monstrous that she experienced as a child, which is watching her fall into addiction and disease and depression, and then that becoming a monster in her own mind that also kind of haunts her, and it becomes larger than life. So that was the message I was getting.
I was going to say the size definitely plays a role here too, because it gets so big, it fills up the house kind of in the same way that it probably filled up Rose's mind and filled up her life, and hence it's her trauma.
Yeah. And that trauma is kind of strangling her. And we see that happen literally as the monster starts to choke her. And it says, "You can't escape your own mind." But then Rose says, "It's my mind and you can't escape it either." And then she breaks the thing's hand to stop the choking. And then she sets it on fire and it tries to chase her. She stumbles out of the house as the fire spreads and then she watches everything burn. And there's this like satisfactory kind of tone shift and it seems like everything might be okay now. So we cut to her driving home. Well, not home. She's driving to Joel's apartment. He lets her in and then she does this big confession, says she's sorry that she dragged him into everything. She starts talking about how she had been afraid to get too close to people and she'd spent so much time keeping distance to protect herself. She says that when they met, he was knocking down some of those walls and that was really scaring her. She apologizes for it and then asks if she could just sleep there that night and if he would watch over her. And then he says he will. And you really start to feel like things are gonna turn around for Rose. But then suddenly Joel's eyes go dark and then he says, "I'll stay with you forever."
There's so much about this part that gets me in the same way that the like mom scene gets you. It's when he says, "I'll stay with you forever." That line, I've experienced trauma in my life. And one of the most difficult parts of my healing process was identifying that no matter how much I heal, no matter what I do, that trauma is still going to exist and will always be a part of me. It's just a matter of like finding a proper way of coping with it. But no matter what you do, that experience will always remain in your mind. And I think that's what this line was doing. And it gets me. I hate it.
Yeah, you can heal, but you can't forget necessarily.
Right. It'll always exist. It is always something that happened. I don't know. It's tough.
No, I think you're absolutely right. So as we watch Joel, everything gets dark and his, now he is the smile and he starts to laugh. She tries to get out, but he chases her. And then suddenly she's not in his apartment. She's in the yard of her childhood home and it didn't burn. And suddenly Joel is there and calling out for her. She screams and she runs back into the house to lock him out. And now the smile demon is there and it's menacing her. And then it rips off his face and you can see so many smiles inside of it, which I assume we're going to talk about that too.
Yes, I promise I have a whole monster part. It's coming.
I can't wait. So she screams and then suddenly stops. And we see the monster try to crack open Rose's jaw and then climb inside of her. And if you remember way back from the beginning of the movie, when Rose was talking to Laura and then suddenly Laura freaked out and then was screaming as Rose was trying to call for help and then suddenly made this choking noise, I think this is what was happening to her. That monster was possessing her.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's it was going into her mouth the same way it's going into Rose's here. Yes.
Joel finally bursts into the room and he looks around the house for her. He can see her in the corner and she is dumping kerosene on her head. And then she turns to look at him and there's the smile. And then she lights herself on fire as Joel watches. End of movie. And for some reason, we get the what is that, the 50s lollipop song? Lollipop, lollipop, what the hell?
So I looked that up. I guess we'll just dive right into it because there's a reason he picked that lollipop song basically for the tonal whiplash that you just said. He wanted the audience to feel that. And he also said he wanted something from that era, which I think is funny that he specifically was like, okay, I want this era and I want tonal whiplash.
Tonal whiplash is absolutely the correct term for this.
Yes, that's what it was. And I have a little quote here from him. It says, "It gives the audience permission to unclench and let the breath they may have been holding out at that moment. Obviously, it's an extremely dark ending, but hopefully it was a way to bring people back down to earth and lean into the vibe that, as mean and dramatic as everything is, that maybe from a certain perspective that exists in this film, she is the butt of a cosmic joke." Which I don't know that is what I got out of that movie or that song. But, that's what he was going for.
I can see it. I don't know that
Yeah.
I would put it that way, but a cosmic joke. But I don't know how else you would put it also.
Yeah,
It's
I think
insane.
it is insane. I think this movie is very heavy on the mental health and trauma, so he's just kind of trying to be like, and back to earth. Hello, everyone. But there's also a fun little fact, and I wonder if this is why he chose the song Lollipop. The monster itself, it's only given a name in the credits where it's labeled as a monstrosity, but the crew and the cast that worked with it, they called it Lollipop because of the way that it ate people.
What?
Yeah, so I don't know which came first, the Lollipop song or the Lollipop nickname, but they go hand in hand.
How many licks does it take to get to the center of your deeply rooted trauma?
Oh, wait, I love that. I want that tattooed. Oh, man.
Matching tattoo idea.
Oh my gosh, yes. But all right, let's get into more since we've started with Lollipop about what this movie is and some of the things I said I was going to talk about. So I mentioned in the beginning how the actress that plays Laura was in the original short that this director, Parker Finn, made. And the short is called Laura Hasn't Slept. And it's really cool. It's like a 12-minute short. You can find it online for free. And it's got two characters in it. It's got Laura and her therapist, Dr. Parsons. I will say the director said that this short film and Smile exist in the same universe, but they don't necessarily happen. Like, this isn't a prequel to Smile. But he said that if you enjoyed the Smile movie and you go back and watch this short, you can see where Smile draws a lot of its similarities and some of the themes from this short. But basically what it is Laura goes and she sees her therapist, Dr. Parsons, and she's telling him that she keeps having a recurring nightmare in which like a sinister figure is appearing to her and smiling. And it takes the appearance of different people, and it results in her developing a fear of sleeping. So she hasn't slept in 2 days. So they talk about that a little bit. And Laura says that the creature is trying to force her to look at its true face. And once it does, she thinks she's going to die. And she starts to kind of like unravel here the same way that Rose does in the movie. And then what happens is the therapist goes, "Well, why are you here, Laura?" And Laura's like, "Well, because I told you I'm not sleeping." And he goes, "Well, wait, are you sure we have ever even met before?" And then like it all gets dark and you realize that the therapist is a bad guy and like the setting starts to fall apart and it starts to look decayed and everything. And then he rips off his face.
Ugh.
So there's that face ripping piece. And Laura looks away and she tries to leave, but she can't get out. And the guy, he finally does like show her his true face, and then she screams and starts to rip off her face. So anyway, if you go back and watch that short, you'll find like a lot of similarities, but it's important, I think, to note that it's not the prequel. But I think it's cool that they're like, oh yeah, so I was able to do Smile because people like this short so much, so let's bring Laura into the beginning of this movie. And I thought that was really cool.
I wonder if there was any inspiration from Poltergeist on this. Because there's a face ripping scene in that too. Or is it just that ripping your own face off is a deeply horrible thing to think about, so it might just appear in lots of horror?
No, now that you say it, like the way, even where they start to rip the face, it's almost identical. And so I think you're right. I think it is.
Well, Charlie, where else would you start to rip your face off?
Well, I don't know,
You-
forehead? They all start from under the eyes. You could start forehead. Who knows? I don't know. That's kind of like the origin of this movie and how Smile was created. But let's talk about the meaning behind this movie and the trauma that we wanted to talk about. And I don't know, do you want to take a minute to talk about like what message you got about trauma regarding this film? Or
I think it's the analogies, they're very heavy-handed. Like, it's not subtle. Trauma that affects you at a young age, especially if it wasn't dealt with properly, which I think we're going to talk about as far as how the sisters were trying to cope with it, can become like a breeding ground for further damage. So that if something else happens in your life and you haven't dealt with that previous trauma, you're not going to be resilient, or perhaps you're less resilient in the face of this new trauma, and that it's a contagion, that it can spread. And I think it's not saying it will literally spread and other people will be traumatized by you, or maybe it is.
no, I think you're on to something there. But yeah, I don't think it's saying that like your trauma is going to cause other people to kill themselves. But in the same way that like Hereditary, like when we talked about in the movie Hereditary how abuse was hereditary through the generations, because oftentimes if you're raised in an abusive household, you carry some of those traits with you and you carry on that generational curse of abuse or whatever. Or it can happen. I'm not saying it always does. So I think that's what it's saying, that if you don't address your trauma, it can affect others. Obviously, like you said, this movie takes it to the extreme and is very heavy-handed. But I think there is still some subtle things happening, or maybe this is just my personal interpretation of it. To start, I think it does some amazing things with the use of trauma, but I also think it does some potentially damaging things as well with its heavy-handedness. But at the surface level, like you said, I think the movie's saying that if you don't address your trauma, it's going to find a way to hurt you and potentially hurt others around you. So like we talked about earlier, the sisters. Let's talk about the sisters first. There's Rose and her sister, and they both went through trauma with their mother. Rose tried to address her trauma multiple ways throughout her life. So she took something bad that happened to her, channeled it into helping others who may have experienced similar issues, like to the ones that she grew up around. And she also did a lot of other positive coping things. So she went to therapy for a period of time. She didn't isolate herself. Like, she's been in multiple relationships in her life, at least 2 that we know of. She's remained active. She's a member of the community. So if you ask most people how to cope with trauma, those are the kind of like standard things you're told to do.
And do you get the idea with Rose that she's doing it almost in a superficial way? Because I did kind of get that. Like, even in that scene where she's talking to her therapist for that emergency session, she's like kind of clinically going over everything and talking about like, she's doing everything quote unquote the right way. And then her therapist brings up confronting the guilt that she had over her mother. And she's like, I'm not dealing with that right now. It kind of, at a certain point in the movie, it felt to me like what Rose's biggest problem was that she didn't confront the root cause of a lot of her issues. And she was trying to cope with everything by doing the right way, like on paper or filling out a checklist of things. She's doing it, but she's not actually engaging with the real issue.
Right. She's doing exactly. You're spot on. She's doing all of the things you're supposed to do to cope, but she's doing it in a way to distract herself from the trauma that she experienced, not to face it head on. But here's the thing. Tell me how one faces their trauma head on. That's the thing. I don't know that answer exists.
I don't know either, because it's not like you can go back. She couldn't go back and talk with her mother. It seems like she and her sister had tried, but I don't know. And that's the thing too. I think the whole idea of saying what's the right or wrong way to deal with this is not a good way to think about it, because that's going to be very different for different people.
Exactly. I agree. And that's where I think some of what this movie does is damaging. But let's talk about it a little bit more. So, like we said, both sisters, they're coping with their trauma by ignoring it. They're taking all these healthy ways that you're supposed to cope and just using it to push everything behind, and by staying way too busy. So we see it in Rose trying to help others who have issues like her mother did. And then we see it with Rose's sister by putting this excessive amount of love and attention into her kids, because she didn't get that when she was growing up. So they're really just overcompensating, I guess could be a way to put it too. And like you said, being superficial about their recovery from this. So yeah, they don't address the root of it, they just mask it. And that masking thing, I think, is important with the Smile, but we'll come to that when we talk about the monster. So yeah, I think I think my personal meaning I got from this movie is that no matter what, like, coping mechanisms you practice, matter like how much meaning you put towards what happened to you, like your trauma, it's still gonna exist. You can't erase it. So the trick is, how do you confront your trauma head on? And I think this movie, it almost like you get that for a second, right? Because Rose, she's super strong, she's super brave, like, she wants to live, and she's willing to go through all of this alone and does everything right. But in the end, it still gets her. So, like, how do you kill the monster? And so far, we don't know how. And I think that's the thing. And the whole, if you kill somebody else, it gets to somebody else. You're not defeating the monster. You're just passing your issues to someone else. So I don't think that's a way to say you can kill the smile monster.
Yeah, exactly. You only temporarily solve it, and only for yourself. And even in that guy's case, he was in prison now. So, now he's trapped. He's still trapped.
He's still trapped, and it came back and found him. And like, Rose could have killed herself right there, and he could have had it again. So yeah, it's still alive, and it's still haunting others, and that sucks. So I think that's the message I got from this movie, is that, like, nobody knows how, like, trauma is something that exists. Nobody knows how to get rid of it. And maybe one day we'll get a Smile sequel where they figure out how to kill the Smile monster. But yeah, I don't love that because it makes life feel a little hopeless and trauma feel a little hopeless.
So we've both seen Smile 2, right?
No, I haven't. And I'm kind of glad I haven't, because I would probably be tempted to talk about it.
It's very good. It might be better than this one. A lot of people say that. I don't know how I feel. I would have to sit with that for a little bit longer. But it is very good. And I think there might be talks about a third one.
There is. From what I've seen, there is talks of a third coming out. Now, what it is, I'm not sure yet. Like, I think it might be a prequel, but I'm not sure.
You might be right. But either way, I mean, as of right now in the story, we don't know how to actually defeat this thing.
Right. And like, Rose did everything she was supposed to do, and it still got her in the end. And that'll tie into my what is this movie at the end. But that's the message I got about trauma in this movie. And honestly, it sucks. I kind of hate it.
It does suck.
But okay. Should we move on to the monster?
Let's talk about something cheerful, like the monster.
Like the monster. Perfect. Okay. So there's a couple things about the monster. Obviously, it takes two forms. First is the smiling people. So we'll start there before we get into the big, scary demon entity thing we see at the end. In theory, this monster resembles a real disorder. There is a thing called Frigoli delusion, which is a delusion that it's named after an Italian actor, Leopold Frigoli, and he was famous for like doing really quick changes in his scenes. And the condition itself is characterized by the delusional belief that several different people are actually the same person but in disguise, and that this person is persecuting you. It was first described in a 27-year-old woman who believed she was being persecuted by two actors that she often saw in the theater. And so that's like the concept behind the smile in a real disorder, mental disorder kind of way.
So let me make sure I understand this. It's a delusion where you think several different people are one person who's very good at disguises and that they are tormenting you.
100%. That is exactly what it is.
Oh.
And so you could say like, oh, that's like a loose comparison. I think you might be making that up. But in Smile 2, this is the only thing I know about Smile 2, there's a character, I think he's pretty early in the beginning, named Louis Frigoli. So clearly the director was like, yeah, you guys got it.
Frigoli is not like a super common last name.
No, the coincidence would be uncanny. It must be. But anyway, so that's the like literal, maybe it's resembling this mental health condition. But I think the smile is also very symbolic too. So I think people would say, so why use a smile? And the smile fandom would say the most widely accepted, straightforward answer to that is that it symbolizes the mask that people that are suffering with mental illness have to wear every day to survive. I think that's the first reason they chose a smile. And then I think the other thing is what I've mentioned a couple times throughout this movie, which is that they're taking this symbol that symbolizes happiness, joy, kindness, and turning it on its head to turn it into a literal evil monster. So I think that duality is very present and important in this film, and that is why the smile in particular was chosen.
I think that definitely comes across. Like the plastering a smile on to either mask up and mask over your trauma. Meanwhile, that monster is just growing. And then literally flipping something that's supposed to be good upside down. And then we see that, of course, with all that camera work where, you know, the footage is being inverted and turned on its head.
Yeah, so it's really cool. I think like they were probably like, what's the cutest thing we could find? Let's turn it evil. Puppy's been done already in Cujo. How about a smile? But yeah, okay. So I think since we're on the smile right now, this is a good time to talk about the marketing campaign.
Oh, yes. My bloody shovel. This was amazing.
Yes, it is. It's really cool. So Daniel Kupchak was tasked by his boss to come up with a viral social stunt that would put the film on the map a couple months before the movie released. So this is a quote from him. Quote, "During the brainstorm, my 3-year-old saw a poster with one of the stars smiling super creepily, and one day she turned to me slowly with a creepy smile. It was so chilling that I knew in that moment we had to bring that creepy smile from the film to people's everyday lives in a way that felt personal and unexpected. I thought, this is so scary because a smile is essentially like a global act of kindness and happiness." End
Oh
quote.
my God. Nobody does creepy smiles like little kids. It's so insane. Okay, just briefly. Did I ever tell you when my kid, who's a teenager now, was around 3, to tell you the story about him talking about the creepy boy outside his window?
No, I love these stories. Tell me.
Okay, so one day he's just talking about this creepy boy who's in the bushes outside of his window. By the way, there were no bushes outside his window, so we're like, what the heck? And you know, you want to encourage kids' imaginations or whatever, but also sometimes the stuff they say is super terrifying. So he's like, yeah, there's a boy who flies outside my window and he hurts people, but he doesn't hurt me. And he was just going on, and I was like, what does this boy look like? And I kid you not, my sweet little boy slowly turns his head to me with a creepy smile, and then he grabs both sides of his hair and he pulls them up and out like horns.
No. Have you asked him about this now that he's like almost an adult? Does he remember?
He does not remember this, but I actually figured it out a couple months later.
Oh, okay. Tell me.
So the bathroom where he took his baths was also kind of like the guest bathroom. So we would put magazines in there. And there was, I don't remember, maybe a Time, or I don't know what magazine it was, but it had a picture of a little baby in like a devil costume. And it was some article about nurture or nature. So it's a little boy looking kind of creepy with horns. And he had just invented the story about him.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's so cool that you figured it out. Kids' imaginations are insane. That's hilarious. Yeah, that would scare me.
It is. But I can see where this marketing professional would take inspiration from their sweet, innocent child who does some of the creepiest stuff ever.
Exactly. So that is what he chose to do. He chose to take that uneasiness, and they placed a bunch of actors at various public events. There was one that appeared in the background of the Today Show, a couple of NFL games, but I think the one that went the most viral was the Major League Baseball games. And they just had these actors stand with neon colored shirts that just said smile. And they stood pretty unmovingly the whole time, but the most important thing was that they had the creepy smiles on their faces the entire game. And why the baseball one was so successful, and he knew this one would be, because baseball's a unique sport where most of the game, you're seeing one part of the crowd the whole time, like right behind home plate. So he knew if he got one behind home plate, they'd get noticed.
Oh, you were so right.
Yeah, whereas like an NFL game, you're seeing the whole stadium, it pans around. But baseball was perfect. And they did debate. They were debating on whether or not to put the actors in white or neon, because neon was kind of, obvious. But he watched a game and he was like, there's no way white's going to stand out. So they put him in neon. And it was funny. So they did it over a couple days. There were multiple actors at multiple games so that it gave this feel that it was happening everywhere and in multiple places, and it couldn't be missed. And the other part was, they did allow the actors to move and go to the bathroom and stuff, but they had to hold the smile the entire time.
Oh my God.
So that like Yeah. So like when they walked by people would be like, what the hell's happening? Like that's what they wanted to happen. And it did. It went viral. It was really, really well done and really cool.
I remember this vividly. I mean, how could you not? The one thing I've wondered and I've never looked up is I remember seeing like the clips on social media and I remember it being in the news and other stuff. What I always wondered was the videos of what looks like, somebody in the crowd happening to see this and like zooming in and going, what the heck is happening? How much of that was actual people out in the wild just seeing this and sharing it versus how much of it was the marketers themselves doing it and filming it that way to make it look like it was natural?
Yeah, I couldn't find and we plotted 2 viral streams out there. I do think they did like a few of them, but I think a lot of it was genuine reactions. And then news stations started picking it up and running news stories on it. So it truly did go viral in a natural way, but I am sure that they put a couple of their own little videos out there to gain traction.
Yeah, I remember it not being, they weren't like pretending like it was a mystery. Or not for very long. Anyway, it was like, look at the scene. Guess what? It's a viral marketing campaign. It was like instant.
Well, right. Because if they wanted it to be more subtle, they wouldn't have written smile on their shirts.
Right.
So, but it was still really cool and freaky. I thought it was really cool.
It was.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's everything I have to say about the smile part of the monster. So let's talk a little bit more about the actual monster. And I think when I say actual monster, it's less about when it looks like the giant mom and more about when it rips its face off and you see all of its smiles. And do you want to describe that a little bit more? Or?
Picture a lasagna with lots of teeth. And it's human-shaped-ish and huge. I think that's about right.
That's about right. Yeah, it's just got all these varying different size mouths, and there's mouths inside mouths, and it kind of looks like one of those fish. Isn't there a fish that does that? It has like multiple rows of teeth.
There's that, but what you made me think of just now is that parasite that gets into a fish's mouth. You know what I'm talking about?
And eats their tongue and becomes their tongue. Yeah. It's so gross. So yeah, both valid ways to describe this monster, just like times 100. So when Finn talks about the monster, he says he wanted the monster to be gleefully evil, which I think he did. He also wanted the reveal of it to feel overwhelming and almost mind-breaking. So I watched a behind-the-scenes video for Smile 2, and he reveals something in that's interesting about the monster. He says it has no true form and that it varies from person to person. But I just think it's interesting that the director himself says, okay, there's no true form. This entity will change.
Well, that makes sense because trauma takes form differently in different people and people's response to it also differs.
Perfect. Yes, I agree completely. So the other cool thing about the design of the monster is that Finn felt it was really important to make the monster like a physical artifact rather than a digital illustration. So he limited the use of special effects and CGI and everything else as much as he could throughout this movie. So there was a physical 9-foot-tall monstrosity that required performers inside of it to puppeteer it and operate the limbs.
What? No way. So when you said, oh my God, earlier when you were like, yeah, they didn't use special effects, I'm like, well, yeah, they did. There's no way that was all practical?
Yeah, as practical as it could be. So I know even like when they lit it on fire before it ripped its face off, they tried to make that as real and they used a stunt performer act like they were on fire so they could have a real reference of how the fire would react with the character in the environment. And then I think obviously the fire on the character is CGI itself, but everything else is as real as it could be. There is a literal prop that is that 9-foot-tall monster.
What about the lasagna man with all the teeth?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one's real. That one exists. Yeah. Yep. I do have a picture of it. I'll post it. I have a picture of the prop.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it's super cool. And they even did that. So you mentioned in the first scene where it zooms in to Laura's eye, or maybe it's Rose's eye. They had to piece together a ton of different scenes to make that look seamless and actually be the eye. That's instead of using a special effects to make that happen, because he wanted it to feel as real as possible.
I think mission accomplished. And also tell me why I'm craving a Stouffer's right about now.
Gross. Absolutely not. I think I'll stay away from lasagna for a while. But yeah, so that's everything about the monster, really. I mean, we could talk about, I think, like you said, this movie's kind of heavy-handed. So the symbolism behind the monster isn't that deep. I mean, it has multiple smiles. It wears multiple faces. It looks different for everybody. It's a physical embodiment of trauma, but that embodiment changes depending on how you see it.
But it needs...
So yeah.
Crucially, it needs an inviting mind, and that inviting mind has to be one that didn't deal with something from before.
Right. Yes. Which is a perfect segue into the last little bit that I want to talk about, which is the ending of the movie. First, I'm going to read a quote from the director again. So, quote, "The movie all along teaches you how to watch it, and teaching that you can't trust Rose's perception. It's in the DNA of the movie to mess with the viewers a little. So I wanted to really pay that off with how the movie ends, how what might feel like an ending might not be an ending. I leaned into that. From early on, I knew I was always interested in following the story to its worst logical conclusion, but I also wanted to have an emotional catharsis. I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. Hopefully the ending delivers on that." So the whole twist of the ending, he did that on purpose just so we could have that little moment of yeah, you overcome your trauma, but he also didn't want the viewers to figure it out. So he was like, nah, just kidding. It got her in the
Yeah, he
end.
took it right away from us at the end, which sucks because you do like Rose. You like her. I don't know. I liked her a lot.
I like her a lot, and she's super smart, and she I think this is a movie that you could look back on it and you're not going to be like, oh man, if she would have done this or that or this, there's really not much else she could have done. So yeah, I don't know. It's sad. So yeah, I think that's really all of it. So maybe that bit of trauma and the talk of trauma that I got from it isn't real. Maybe the director just wanted the ending to be a twist and something we couldn't predict, but that's what I got out of it. And I think it's deeper than it might appear, even though it's heavy-handed.
Yeah, I think you're going to hate Smile 2 is what I think.
Fair. I do want to watch it, and hopefully we'll review that one day. Maybe right before Smile 3 comes out. Who knows? But all right. So do we want to talk about what this movie is? Is it horror? Is it sad? Is it something else?
Yes. Tell me what you think. What's your vote?
Okay. So my vote is that it's actually really sad. And that's not to say that this movie isn't scary. Without a doubt, it's scary. The jump scares are really well done. It's uneasy the entire time. I think there's some of the creepiest scenes in any movie I've ever seen, those phone call fake outs. Those are really good. But the story behind it, that unresolved trauma, traveling and hurting other people, that made it really sad to me. And then we've already talked about this multiple times, but what really drives the sadness home for me is rooting for the main character the whole time. She is so smart. She's turned her trauma into helping others. She's got an iron will to stay alive. She's brave. She's willing to do what she needs to do to confront this thing, but it gets her in the end. And you're rooting for her, and you think she beats it, and maybe she'll go back and get the love of her life, and then boom, she's back to the very beginning. She has to start all over, and she can't do it. So to me, it's sad. Yeah. And it sucks. What do you think it is?
I think you're right. And I also look at this the opposite way. So I think this movie is fucking terrifying. It's scary, and it's scary because it feels like it could be real. Not in the sense of there's a little monster chasing you around, but because you're being haunted by trauma that's taking over and spreading, and you can't do anything about that. And while there's a lot of sadness involved in that, there's the sadness of the story and the original trauma, and how people may or may not help you in that circumstance. The scariness of it overcomes everything else. And I think that's what Smile is. The fear is so strong that you can't actually deal with that underlying sadness that was the beginning of your entire problem. And I think that's what makes it so terrifying.
That's so true. Yeah. So we're saying the same thing, where I'm saying it's sad and you're saying it's scary. I agree. It's both for sure. I think
it's sad because it's scary. It's scary because it's sad, and it's well done.
It is. Yeah, it is. I think there's some small critiques. I don't think it's the perfect film in the way that Hereditary is perfect, but it is really good.
Yeah, we're allowed to still have our favorites. This one's very good, though.
It is good. It is. But okay, that does it for us today. So listeners, may the horrors persist.
With a smile. Thanks for listening to Horror Sandbox. For show notes, credits, and contact information, check out our website at www.horrorsandbox.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube @Horror Sandbox. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with all the horror fans in your life.
What's that sound?
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.